Hi, I'm Felice Fryer. I'm one of the healthcare reporters at the Boston Globe, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Boston Globe's Health and Biotech Week. And it's a real honor to kick it off this week with an interview with one of the more remarkable people in the biotech world today, and that is Dr. Hugh Herr. So Hugh's title is Professor of Media Arts and Sciences at MIT, but that scarcely does justice to the magnitude of what he's doing. What he does is he makes bionic limbs, and he's going to tell us more about that now. So Hugh has a really extraordinary story that I'm hoping he'll come on soon and tell us more about, but he lost his lower legs in a hiking accident when he was 17. And that's what got him into this line of work and into the future of prosthetic limbs. And he'll be able to tell us about, what his own experience has been, as well as what he is doing for other people. There we go. Thank you, Dr. Herr. It's great to have you. I know you have told this story many times before, but I'm not sure that everyone in our audience has heard it. So please tell us what happened to you when you were 17 that got you into the whole world of prosthetic limbs.
Sure. So I am a mountain climber. I began mountain climbing when I was 7. So by the time I was 11, 12, 13, I was a top climber in the United States. At the age of 17, I was climbing with my climbing partner at the time, Jeff Batzer. We were ice climbing on Mount Washington in January. And we intended to be a single day out ice climbing turned into nearly 4 days. We were disoriented in a blizzard, excuse me. And to make a long story short, we suffered severe frostbite and hypothermia. And ultimately, after months of effort by my medical team, both of my legs were amputated below the knee due to tissue damage from frostbite. Then after that, after a month or so of healing, I was fitted with artificial limbs. They were very, very low tech. I was shocked at how low tech they were. And really at that time, I became interested in prosthetic design and really dedicating my life to making prostheses and exoskeletons better, not only for myself, but for everyone worldwide.
So when you say they were low tech, what were they like? I mean, you could walk in them, right? But you couldn't climb.
No, excuse me, the first prosthesis I received had a foot called the Satch foot. And the Satch foot is a wood core with a foam heel and a rubber tip. There's no ankle. The ankle is just rigid. So it's something that kind of works if you walk at an incredibly slow pace. But in no way does it capture what the biological foot ankle complex does dynamically for walking and running. The foot had no sensing, computational intelligence, no actuation, no ability to adapt against walking speed and slopes and steps and all the disturbances that a normal person sees walking around during their day.
Yeah. So what did you do? I understand you started right off adapting those limbs so that you could climb. Tell us a little bit about what you did then as a teenager.
Yeah, so I was, before the accident, mountain climbing was my passion. Was everything in my life. So naturally after the accident, I wanted to return to my chosen sport of mountain climbing. The question was, how might that be possible with using artificial limbs? When I first went climbing, it was 2 weeks after entering the rehabilitation center in Philadelphia. So I had just received my first artificial limbs. The next weekend, they allowed me to go home and take my limbs with me. And my brother and I went climbing. So at the time, I could barely walk. I was using canes and crutches, but when I got to the wall, when I got onto the vertical world, I felt like I was home once again. Mm. And then months and months after that, I began climbing more and more, and I realized that the artificial limbs that were given to me were intended for the level earth, for walking, and they were not intended for the vertical world of rock and ice climbing. So I set out in a design effort. I said, what would an artificial limb look like if it were optimized for vertical rock and ice? And I began that journey, and I quickly said, well, these limbs need not look biological. If biological isn't optimal, then I was fully prepared to go down the journey of kind of non-anthropomorphic, non-human-like limbs, if it would provide me an augmentation in climbing. So I started, I said, I don't need that heel. So I cut off the heel of my prosthetic foot. Oh, the feet are too long. So I made them really short because that's advantageous when you're standing on tiny rock fissures the width of a coin. I built feet that would wedge into small rock fissures where the human foot cannot penetrate. I developed feet that were spiked for penetrating ice walls. The weight of the artificial limbs were much, much lighter than biological limbs. So given that I had the same arm strength, I augmented my capabilities in terms of body to weight ratio, strength to weight ratio. So through all this, it was 12 months after my limbs were amputated then when I was climbing better with artificial limbs than I'd ever climbed before the accident with biological limbs.
Wow.
Really, really inspiring.
Yeah. So when you moved ahead and it became, you started your lab and you started working on designing artificial limbs, what did you bring to that other people hadn't? What was your approach that was different than what had been done before?
In the early days?
Yeah, back when you first started working on designing them.
Yeah, I think the advantage I had was allowing myself to not design in a biomimetic framework, if you will, allowing myself to say, I don't care what these look like. I'm going to completely focus on function. Other people that may have experienced this may have said, oh, it's a little embarrassing that the foot doesn't look like a foot and that it's tubular and endoskeletal and doesn't look like a biological limb. Like, I really didn't care. I wanted to completely maximize my athletic function. So I think that gave me freedom and a greater ability to succeed.
So tell us about your legs now. What
Sure.
can you do with them? Can you run? What do they look like? How well do they work?
So I've lots of legs. I imagine if I went into your closet, I would see lots of shoes. So when you go into my closet, you see lots of legs. It's the same thing. So some legs I wear for everyday use, just for walking, going to work, and so on. Other legs I use for scuba diving or running or rock climbing or ice climbing. So I'm able to adapt my physicality by switching out components and parts of the artificial part of my body. My everyday legs are robotic. They're computer controlled ankle foot prostheses that my lab developed. Each of my feet, and I'm wearing them now, each foot has 12 sensors, 3 microprocessors the size of your thumbnail, a muscle tendon-like actuator that applies torque and power about the artificial ankle joint. When I walk, if you put a black box around my body when I'm walking, and you measured my walking speed and my musculoskeletal stress and my metabolic rate, you wouldn't be able to tell that both of my legs are artificial. Which is
Wow.
a huge accomplishment for Bionics. There's still limitation, but the field has come a long way.
I'm just gonna ask you, is it the same as having legs, but you're saying there's still limitations there?
Yeah, 100%. So the legs I'm wearing, they're robotic and they run algorithms on chip, small computers on the device. My nervous system isn't attached, and I'm not able to think and control the bionic limb, nor am I able to feel the bionic limb. So when I touch the bionic limb, it doesn't feel like when I touch my arm. When I move the joint, it doesn't feel like the proprioception that I experience when I move my elbow. So I'm on top of these technologically sophisticated robots, but they're powerful tools. They're not part of my body. So our goal in research is to actually create new bodies, not more and more powerful devices. And we'll do that by connecting the nervous system and the skeleton directly to the electromechanics. So when we ask the person, what is your body? They'll actually include the electromechanics.
How far along is that? What's the status of that research?
Yeah, my MIT lab and I co-direct a broad Bionic center at MIT called the K. Lisa Yang Center for Bionics. It was launched 2 years ago after a generous gift from Lisa Yang, a wonderful philanthropist. So we're actually pretty far along. We now have prostheses that directly attach to the skeleton using what's called osseointegration, where typically a titanium shaft goes across the skin membrane into bone, and then the bone fuses or integrates with the titanium. And as that titanium exits through the skin, you can bolt the external robot to it. So you have direct loading to the skeleton. And that the titanium shaft also has fine wire electrical leads. So we have a wired ability to signal in and out of the peripheral nervous system to the external robot. So in a few human subjects, we've advanced these really sophisticated prostheses that are linked to muscles and nerves and to bone. And again, it's fascinating because when we make that control bidirectional, when the person can think and their thought directly is communicated to agency where they can move the bionic limb, they have direct control of the motors. And when they feel the limb as a natural percept, it ceases to become a tool and is viewed by the person as just part of their body, like their own flesh and bone limbs. So that's exciting.
So there's a handful of people out there right now who have these limbs and are living with them?
So to the sophistication that we're pursuing at MIT, we're pursuing interfaces that are not commercially available yet. So we're doing the fundamental human machine science.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the results of our work will be commercialized and be available to the masses.
But what I mean is that even in the experimental sense, are there actual people who've gone home with these limbs attached to them, or are you just testing the ability to do that?
So the full system is not take home. So the person in the study will come to the MIT lab. We'll turn on their brain control and their cutaneous and proprioceptive feedbacks to test the power of those capabilities within the lab in a very safe environment. A next step, pun intended, is to do a broad study, multi-site study, where it would probably have a take-home component to the study. Maybe the person takes it home for 3 months. And then after that, there'll be a commercial launch. So that's kind of
Any idea how long that's gonna take? What's your best guess?
Yeah, for some of our capabilities, my hope is within 5 years, there'll be a commercial offering. Yeah, which is exciting.
Yeah, but now are people actually, does this include sensation? Can people feel the floor under their feet, or is it just that they have a sense of this limb being part of them?
The first commercial systems will primarily be controlled through thought, and less of the direct feedback creating sensations. And then after that, the most advanced systems is there's brain control and feedback of touch and joint movement.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
So this means the ultimate goal is that somebody can like walk along the beach and feel the sand through their artificial toes up into their brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And proprioception as well, to feel the position and speed and torque of their joints. All these things that people with normal bodies take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, you can imagine, again, the robots I'm now wearing. When the ankle moves, I can't feel the movement. I can't feel, my prosthetic foot touch the carpet in my office. So yeah, all that will change in these future systems.
Then in terms of the ones like the ones that you have now, the ones that are currently available, how available are they? Are they crazy expensive? Does insurance cover it? I remember after the marathon bombing, there were a number of people who needed prosthetic limbs and they needed charity to pay for it. Do you know, what does it cost and how widely available are these?
Yeah, reimbursement is a tremendous challenge in prosthetics and orthotics. The robotic limbs that I'm wearing that my lab developed are now commercial products by a company called Autobach. They're a German-based company. And in the US, they're called Empowers. The Empowers are reimbursed for about 14% of people that need them in the US. And that 14%, people in military hospitals like Walter Reed, people in the VA network, and people that are covered by workman's comp. So they've not yet been recognized by standard insurance.
So what is the other 86%? What are they wearing?
Typically, if they're lucky, they're wearing foot ankle devices that are passive, and they're made of carbon composite, like what typical tennis rackets or golf clubs are made out of. So they're lightweight, they're springy, but they're dumb. There's no sensing or computation or actuation.
But they're better than what you had when you first lost.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Because they're springy. So they kind of propel you forward a small amount. Can
you tell us about the work you're doing with exoskeletons? What is that,
sure.
And where does that stand?
So I'll begin with definition. So a prosthesis, for those in the audience that are not part of this field, a prosthesis replaces a body part. So the fact that I have amputated biological limbs below the knee, I require a prosthetic foot and ankle. A brace or an exoskeleton is something that augments a limb that's there. So you might have you might suffer a stroke or paralysis, and you wear an orthosis or exoskeleton to augment the limb that's already there. An exoskeleton, the term can be used for rehabilitation when the limb has some type of pathology, or it can be used in the case of augmentation. So there's a whole field now where exoskeletons are being developed to augment human strength, human agility, the ability to jump high, run fast, sort of the Hollywood vision of Bionics is now being pursued. My lab at MIT was the first group in the world to invent and build a leg exoskeleton that autonomously can be worn. And we showed that the exoskeleton reduces metabolic costs to move and increases speeds to walk and to run. That was in 2014, when we first showed that an exoskeleton could augment human walking. And today we've spun out a company called Defy, where we're further advancing the technology. And our vision is, apparel and shoes of the future will be bionic. So everyone will be able to explore augmentation. You'll walk down the streets of Boston and you'll routinely see humans wearing bionic apparel, bionic shoes. They'll be able to walk faster, jump higher, move with less musculoskeletal stress, and so on. So it's a very, very exciting time to be in the field.
In the short term, who do you envision using these kinds of exoskeletons? Is it the military primarily, or what would you use it for?
Oh no, so you know what it's like when you're at the airport and you're walking along and you have your bags and you suddenly hit the moving walkway. And you're like, wow, I'm going kind of fast here. And then unfortunately the walkway ends and you're like, oh my gosh, walking is so slow and laborious. So these bionic shoes we're developing, it's basically built into the shoe where you're always augmented like you're on a walkway. So I think in 10, 15 years, we're going to be like, remember when shoes didn't do anything? Remember in the dark ages when shoes were just passive? That's how pervasive I think this technology will be. So who will benefit? Everyone will benefit. But from a perspective of kind of not just fun, but really improving quality of life, all the people that we know in our lives that have what I call range anxiety, like your grandmother or mother may, because of age-related degeneration, may be afraid to go on that hike or to go to the mall with their grandkids because walking is hard and strenuous, and they may have joint disease and may have pain. So people with that type of range anxiety, these types of bionic shoes or limbs can really be helpful and remove that range anxiety. It's not unlike e-bikes. So e-bikes now, the grandfather can keep up with the grandson on a bike ride, right? Or the person that's less fit can keep up with a person that's more fit.
Will you become less fit from using these? Would your own muscles atrophy?
No, it's similar to bicycles. So I'm not aware of a bicycle ever making someone less fit. The opposite is true. It makes them more fit. So you're right. If the exoskeleton isn't designed well and the exoskeleton does 100% of the movement, that's not healthy for the human. But how these exoskeletons are designed is a collaboration between the technology and human physiology. So the human physiology, just like a bicycle, is still working, but the human plus machine is augmented. The human plus machine jumps higher, moves faster, moves with less pain for the human. So the opposite is true. These platforms will lead to a much healthier society. And the reason is, most humans in the world hate running. Like, it's really painful to run, right? Independent of age, it's exhausting, right? these systems will make running fun. Yeah, so that fun element will get people off the couch and get them moving more, which is exciting from a healthcare perspective.
That's very interesting, making running fun. All right, I'm on board with that. We have a really interesting question from the audience. What is being developed for patients who have not lost a limb but have neurological damage due to a brain or spinal cord injury or other medical conditions?
Great. At the K. Lisa Young Center for Bionics here at MIT, we actually have a program that's focused on persons that have suffered a stroke or persons that have suffered spinal cord injury. So if a limb is completely paralyzed, we're working on a future where the technology is implanted into the biology, into the muscles, and we actually use the muscles under computer control. So imagine a world where with small computers and small power supplies that we could digitally control and feedback loops, living muscle tissue. So if there is a break in communication between the central brain and the peripheral, we can use these digital nervous systems to restore movement, either for the upper extremity or for the lower extremity. So we're developing the fundamental platform that will allow us to close the loop and directly control the positions and forces of biological muscle. And when we do that, it'll be a platform technology that can be used for the treatment of the mitigation of disability from spinal cord injury, from stroke, and many other conditions.
Does this involve an implant into the brain directly?
Not to the brain, but so how it will work is we'll implant small magnetic spheres into muscles and tendons. And with external electronics, we can track the movement of the muscle tendon and the forces that are applied. So those sensory signals will be sent to a computer worn on the belt of the person. And then that computer will run sophisticated algorithms that orchestrate the artificial stimulation of the muscles of, for example, the leg to restore something as complex as walking.
So you're talking about for somebody who has like a spinal cord injury where
Correct.
the nerves have been severed. But what about like a neurodegenerative disease like ALS? Is there anything in what you're working on that would help with that? Or
yes, some conditions it's difficult because of nerve degeneration to artificially activate muscle. So some conditions an exoskeleton is appropriate. Other conditions, this kind of digital nervous system is appropriate. So what we need in this area of medicine is a menu of technologies, a menu of options. And we go through and as clinicians pick the appropriate technology for the person's condition.
so you talked about how 10, 15 years from now, we're going to have these wonderful shoes. What are we going to have 50 years from now? What are you other augmentations are you envisioning into the future?
Yeah, I mean, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, you know, what I said earlier in our conversation is I think is really profound. This idea that we're now in a point in human history where we're transitioning from humans as mere tool users to humans that are actually embodied in technology. So again, our systems that are linked to the nervous system and the skeleton. When you ask the patients, what is your body? They include the electromechanics, as if the electromechanics were their own flesh and bone. So we've actually, with technology and bioengineering, we've actually rebuilt the person's body. But that suggests that you can sculpt the body. You can, maybe even non-anthropomorphic attachments can be embodied by the human nervous system. could we build wings that are attached to the nervous system? And would those wings be embodied by the human nervous system? We don't know, but if the answer is yes, then, in 100 years, humans will be unrecognizable from what we are today.
Wow, because we'll have wings, we'll have extra limbs, we'll have.
And if you can adapt our bodies, if our bodies become palettes for design, then if you couple that to human imagination, and human desire and need, there's going to be a lot of a huge expansion of human diversity.
Wow.
Not only in physicality, but in cognition, emotional experience, and so on. So what I'm saying probably scares half of the audience, and maybe it's exciting to the other half. To me, it's exciting. I mean, in today's world, I'm frustrated, and I think we're probably all frustrated by how narrow society views intelligence and views female beauty, male beauty, gender, all these constructs. Bionics has the potential to vastly augment human diversity, where a person that may not have normal limbs or a normal body can still be powerful and beautiful, accepted. So that to me, that Bionics has a very, very exciting potential, and fun to talk about how it may shift human consciousness and how we view what is human, the fundamental question of what it means to be human.
Wow, that's fascinating. All right, I have a question from the audience. Is there cross-fertilization between those in this field and the scientists creating robots? Can these prosthetic technologies be used to improve robots?
Oh, great question. Great question. Yeah, the design specifications for a bionic ankle or a knee or a bionic elbow or a bionic hand are really intense. So my bionic ankles, for example, have to be ideally smaller than the biological foot ankle. Why? Because you want to put an artificial skin over it and not have it be bigger than a biological limb. They have to be ideally quiet, because people don't want to walk in late to a movie or to church and everyone turns around and says, "What is that racket? It sounds like a robot just walked in," right? They need to be efficient. You need to be able to charge or refuel them and then go throughout an entire day on a single charge. So those really demanding technological constraints are now being imposed on bionic design and not on humanoid design. And what I predict is ultimately when we have optimal bionic ankles and knees and hips and elbows, you'll be able to bolt together a humanoid robot like an erector set. So great question.
Right. Do you see any potential, this is also an audience question, for helping people with invisible disabilities like chronic pain? Could any of these devices be helpful in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So today I emphasized how bionics can be used to enhance physicality. Of course, bionics can also be used to mitigate other forms of human limitation. You mentioned pain. We're able to now to dramatically reduce phantom pain in people with amputation. But broadly, bionics will also be able to augment our central brains, reduce depression. I think ultimately we'll be able to solve severe conditions like schizophrenia and anxiety and so on.
Through bionics?
Yeah, I have a broad definition of bionics. So we now live in a world where the dominant intervention for conditions of the brain are pharmacological. So we dope this complex computer that we call the human brain with a chemical, with that's not very, doesn't have a high level of specificity and often has unfavorable side effects. So there's now a race in the neural tech world to be able to have interfaces to the brain where we can turn on and off individual cell types with incredible specificity. So you can imagine 50 years from now, when these platforms are developed, really being able to treat something like severe depression and anxiety with incredible specificity. So yeah, absolutely. My colleagues are working on these interfaces. You know, nanoscale devices, for example, that travel up the into the deep aspects of the brain through the circulatory pathways of the brain. They park, and with external power, you can apply signals and turn on and off cells. So there's a lot of exciting work going on.
All right, one last question, kind of a technical question. One of our audience members wants to know, with the osseointegration, is that permanent, or does the person take it out when they go swimming? Or?
Great question. I love these questions. Fantastic audience here today. No. So well, let me clarify. So again, osseointegration, the bone fuses to the titanium, and it's really robust. Like, you cannot remove it. In fact, if it fails, the titanium fatigues, not the titanium bone interface. That's how strong the interface is. So you have this titanium shaft coming through the skin and poking out the body. And then you can bolt anything to that shaft. So you can't remove the shaft easily, but you can bolt and unbolt the bionic limb from the exiting shaft, right? And people with these osseo implants, in fact, can do that. They can unclip like a person unclips from a ski binding, right? They can unclip their bionic limb, but you still have that osseo integrated titanium piece coming out the skin.
Another good question from the audience. Is there likely to be any problematic interactions between the human immune system and advanced bionic implants?
Wow, what a great question. So I mentioned we have the goal of controlling living muscle tissue with computers. So the method we're pursuing to stimulate muscle is called optogenetics. And many in the audience may know what optogenetics is, but for those who do not, optogenetics, so there's certain algae that express these light sensitive proteins, these opsins, that when you shine light on the protein, it creates a neural response or a voltage. And there's a whole field called optogenetics, and my colleague Ed Boyden, for which I co-direct the Yang Center for Bionics, was actually one of the key inventors of optogenetics. So how it works is you deliver to a brain cell of interest or a nerve these light sensitive proteins using a viral vector, and then by shining light on the cell at a certain wavelength, you can turn the cell on electrically. So we don't stimulate nerves with electricity. We shine light on them, because inside the nerves are these light sensitive proteins that when we shine light at just the right wavelength, we can cause a neural response in the muscle to contract. So because these opsins don't come from humans, we recently discovered that they cause an immune response. So a key goal of our center is to create human-friendly opsins, human-friendly light-sensitive proteins that will not trigger the immune response of the human. And when we do that, optogenetics will be an extraordinarily powerful clinical tool.
So if I followed you correctly, there is some potential for an immune response, and this is still something you're working on to make sure it doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that it could be rejected by the body, just like a transplanted organ.
I mean, typically biomedical devices that are implanted in the body go through lots of preclinical studies to make them biocompatible. So that's, the titanium implant that I mentioned has gone through lots and lots of preclinical work to be safe for human use. The magnets I mentioned are coated with nickel and copper and this material called parylene C to make them biocompatible. But from a protein engineering perspective, we also need to design proteins that are friendly for human use, so we can have these extraordinary switches into the nervous system.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. This audience member wants to know if you are collaborating with other laboratories.
Oh, absolutely. So the human body is very, very diverse. The human body has many systems. We're chemical, we're electricity, we're mechanical. So it's so many engineering disciplines and design and art disciplines are relevant to bionics. So at the Kay Lisa Yang Center for Bionics, we have geneticists. We have people that specialize in artificial intelligence, on robotics. We have people that specialize on drug delivery, on cell regeneration. We have designers, people that, because we're designing new body parts. They have to be aesthetically pleasing, right? So Bionics is fun because the diversity of knowledge, the diversity of people is truly amazing.
Great. All right. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Any parting thoughts?
No, I'm just
anything else
happy to be here, and it's a pleasure to speak with everyone. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.